Daniel Cross stepped off his small cargo ship and into the crowded market of Ares Prime, a planet famous for strange goods and dangerous deals. The air was thick with the smell of alien spices and hot metal. Neon signs flashed in strange languages, and voices from 100 species filled the narrow streets. Daniel kept his head down, hoping to buy some spare ship parts and leave quickly. His ship, the Star Wanderer, had been damaged during a meteor storm. The hull needed repair, and his fuel cells were running low. He had just enough credits to fix what was broken, or so he thought. He walked past stalls selling glowing crystals, living plants from deep oceans, and weapons older than human history. He ignored the sellers calling out to him, keeping his eyes on a small repair shop at the far end. Then, a loud voice cut through the noise. The next item, rare, valuable, and completely unique. The auctioneer shouted. Curious faces turned toward a raised platform in the center of the street. Daniel was about to walk away when he saw the item. It wasn't an object. It was a girl, or rather, a young alien woman. Her skin was a soft silver color that caught the light. Her hair shimmered like threads of gold. Her eyes glowed faintly, a deep, otherworldly blue. She stood with her wrists bound by metal cuffs. Her expression was calm, but her eyes searched the crowd like she was looking for something. Daniel froze. He had seen slavery before in the darker corners of space, but it always made his stomach turn. He didn't know this girl's story, but he could feel it. She didn't belong here. The auctioneer called out numbers, and voices shouted back. Daniel kept walking, telling himself it wasn't his problem. Then, something strange happened. A man beside him lifted a small paddle to place a bid. At the exact same moment, Daniel scratched the side of his head, and the auctioneer's scanner read his movement as a signal to bid. The crowd roared. The auctioneer laughed. "We have a new offer from the human." Daniel's heart sank. "No way, I'm not." But it was too late. The auctioneer slammed his hand down. "Sold to the human outsider." A guard pushed the alien girl toward him. Daniel raised his hands. "I didn't buy her. It's a mistake." But the guard shoved her into his arms and barked, "Take her and go before the law asks questions." Daniel looked down at her. She stared back, her blue eyes glowing brighter now. "You freed me," she said softly. Her voice was smooth, musical. "You are mine now." "What?" No, I'm not." Daniel began, but before he could finish, angry shouts filled the air. Some buyers were furious, accusing him of cheating the auction. Others shouted about the contract and ownership rights. Guards were starting to move in. The girl suddenly grabbed his hand. "We must go," she said, pulling him with surprising strength. Before Daniel could argue, she was leading him down a narrow alley, weaving through shadows and market smoke. Behind them, footsteps pounded on metal walkways. They turned corners, ducked under hanging wires, and slipped between stacks of cargo crates. The noise of the market faded, replaced by the hum of distant machinery. Daniel's breath came fast. "Who are you?" he asked. "Why are they after you?" She glanced over her shoulder, her golden hair catching the dim light. "I am Liara of the Cathari," she said. "They took me from my people. They meant to sell me to the highest bidder." Her eyes narrowed. "But you cut the chain. So now I am bound to you." Daniel shook his head. "That's not how this works. I don't own you. You do not own me," she interrupted. "But I have chosen you husband." Daniel almost tripped over a loose cable. "Husband?" "No, I think there's been some kind of..." A loud metallic crash echoed behind them. The guards had found their trail. Lyra's hand tightened on his. "Talk later, run now," she said. They sprinted toward the edge of the market, passing under flickering lights and abandoned signs. Daniel's mind was spinning. One moment he was shopping for ship parts. The next he was running with an alien woman calling him her mate. He didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear. The people chasing them weren't going to stop. Ahead, the alley opened into a dark docking bay. Daniel could see the outline of his ship at the far end. Liara stopped suddenly and pulled him behind a stack of barrels. Two guards, walked past, scanning the shadows. Liara's grip stayed firm, her glowing eyes never leaving the danger. When the guards passed, she whispered, "If we reach your ship, I can explain everything." Daniel nodded slowly, still catching his breath. "Fine, but once we're on my ship, you're telling me exactly what's going on." Lyra's lips curved into a small smile. "Yes, husband," she said softly. Then with a sudden burst of speed, she pulled him toward the safety of the Star Wanderer. The alarms in the market began to wail, and the chase was far from over. But deep inside, Daniel had the uneasy feeling that this was only the beginning. The chase. The docking bay was darker than Daniel remembered. Metal walls rose high on both sides, dripping with condensation from the planet's humid atmosphere. Dim yellow lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. Daniel's heart was still racing. Liara moved ahead of him with quiet, confident steps. Her silver skin caught the faint light, making her seem almost unreal in the gloom. He kept glancing behind them, expecting to see guards rushing in at any moment. "Why are they so desperate to catch you?" Daniel whispered. Liara didn't look back. "Because they know what I am," she said, "and they fear what I can do." Before Daniel could ask more, a sharp metallic clang rang out from the far side of the bay. The sound bounced between the fey walls. Daniel's instincts screamed at him. They weren't alone. Suddenly, 3 tall alien enforcers stepped out from behind a cargo loader. Their armor was dark green, patterned like reptile scales. Each carried a long stun rifle with glowing coils. Their leader, a broad figure with a scar across his jaw, raised his weapon and called out, "Human! Hand over the Cathari girl, and we will let you live." Daniel's stomach tightened. He glanced at Liara, expecting fear, but she stood tall, her glowing blue eyes locked on the leader. "Not going to happen," Daniel said, surprising himself. The scarred alien's lip curled. "Then you die together." He raised his hand, and the others aimed their rifles. Liara moved faster than Daniel's eyes could follow. She grabbed a loose steel pipe from the ground and swung it into the nearest light fixture. Sparks rained down, plunging half the bay into shadow. "Run!" she shouted, grabbing Daniel's arm. They sprinted toward the far side. Weaving between stacks of cargo, the air was thick with the smell of oil and hot machinery. Energy blasts from the rifles sizzled past them, leaving glowing scorch marks on the walls. Daniel's lungs burned as they turned down a side passage. This one was narrower, lined with thick cables and pipes. Liara led the way, her movements precise and fast. Every few seconds, she would glance back to check the distance. "They won't stop," she said between breaths. "Once they mark you as my mate, you are part of my clan. They will hunt you to break me." Daniel nearly stumbled. "Mate? I'm not. You are now," she cut in, her tone sharp. "Whether you wish it or not, their law sees you as mine." They reached a metal door. Liara slammed her hand on the control panel, but it only buzzed in protest. "Locked," Daniel said, looking around for another way. The sound of boots hitting metal floors was getting closer. Liara crouched, pried open the panel's casing, and began pulling wires with quick, practiced hands. Daniel's eyes darted to the corner of the corridor. Shadows moved. The enforcers were coming fast. Any time now would be good, he urged, with a small spark in the hiss. The door slid open. They slipped inside just as a rifle blast scorched the wall behind them. They found themselves in a maintenance tunnel. The space was cramped, with low ceilings and pipes running along both sides. Steam hissed from a broken vent. The air was thick and hot. Liara kept moving. "We take this to the underdocks," she said. "From there, we reach your ship unseen." Daniel followed, trying to ignore the clanging footsteps echoing behind them. He wanted answers. Who she was, why they feared her, why she kept calling him husband. But right now, survival came first. Halfway through the tunnel, Liara suddenly stopped. Her ears, long, elegant, and pointed, twitched slightly. "They split into 2 groups," she said. "One follows us here. The other goes to your ship." Daniel's heart dropped. If they reach the ship, they won't, she said firmly. We'll get there first. But the tunnel ahead was no longer empty. From the steam stepped two more armored enforcers, blocking the way. One raised a weapon, but Liara was already in motion. She ducked under the barrel, slammed her palm into the alien's chest, and twisted. The rifle from his grip, the second guard lunged, but Daniel, acting on pure instinct, grabbed a loose wrench from the wall and swung hard. The alien staggered back, stunned. Liara finished the fight in seconds. The two enforcers lay groaning on the floor. Come, she said. No more time. They burst from the maintenance tunnel into the underdocks. A vast open space under the main market. The air smelled of coolant and fuel. Ships of all shapes and sizes rested on landing pads. Workers moved between them, unaware of the chase happening just above. Daniel spotted the Star Wanderer at the far end. His chest tightened with relief, but Liara grabbed his arm before he could run forward. Her voice was low and urgent. They have already placed trackers in the area, she said. Once we leave, they will follow into space. Daniel stared at her. Then what do we do? Liara's glowing eyes met his, calm despite the chaos. We fight, she said. Or we run so far that not even the stars will remember their names. And with that, the final sprint toward the ship began. First contact of hearts. The docking. Bay doors groaned as the Star Wanderer sealed shut behind them. Daniel leaned back against the cold wall of the cargo hold, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. Liara stood a few steps away, silent, her glowing eyes scanning the small space as if memorizing every detail. The hum of the ship's engines filled the air. Daniel walked over to the pilot's console and started the launch sequence. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear. At least not the same fear from before, but from the weight of what had just happened in less than an hour. He had gone from a simple parts run to being chased by armed enforcers with an alien girl calling him husband. You should sit, he said over his shoulder. It's going to be a bumpy ride until we're in orbit. Liara didn't move. Right away, instead, she tilted her head slightly, watching him. You are hurt, she said. Her voice was soft but carried a strange certainty. Daniel glanced down, noticing for the first time a long cut across his forearm from when they had run through the maintenance tunnel. It's nothing, he muttered, but she stepped forward anyway. From a small pouch at her side, she pulled out a thin, folded piece of metallic cloth. She unwrapped it to reveal a soft, glowing gel. Without asking, she took his arm gently in her hands. Her touch was cool, steady. She spread the gel over the cut, and the pain faded almost instantly. Daniel stared at her. What is that stuff? A healing salve, she replied, made from the roots of the caliph plant on my world. It closes wounds and draws out poison. She tied the cloth loosely over his arm, securing it with practiced hands. He hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the market. Why me? Out of everyone in that crowd, why say I'm your husband? Liara's eyes softened. In my culture, the Cathari choose their life mate only once. It is not a decision made by family or law. It is made by the heart. When you freed me, even without knowing you were doing it, you became part of my story. My life debt is not just about freedom, it is about fate. Daniel let out a short, nervous laugh. Fate? I didn't free you because of fate. It was an accident. Her gaze didn't waver. Perhaps for you, but for me, there are no accidents. The ship shook as it left Vara's Prime's atmosphere. Stars stretched across the view screen. Daniel focused on the flight path, needing something solid to concentrate on. Look, Liara. I'm not looking for, I know, she interrupted gently, and I do not expect your heart to change in a single day. But I will not leave your side, not while there are those who would harm you to reach me. Daniel sighed, unsure whether to feel comforted or concerned. The way she said it wasn't a threat, it was a promise. One she seemed willing to defend with her life. The ship's navigation system beeped, alerting him to a tailing signal. Daniel's stomach sank. "They're following us," he muttered. "Looks like you were right about the trackers," Layara stepped closer, her expression calm. "We can shake them if we reach the asteroid belt near the Ilian Rift. I know hidden paths there." He raised an eyebrow. "You know space routes out here?" "I traveled many worlds before I was taken," she said. "My people are wanderers, traders and warriors. I learned the stars like you learned your own streets." For the next hour, they navigated through the black sea of space, weaving between drifting rocks the size of cities. Daniel had to admit, she was right. She guided him through tight gaps and sudden turns that confused a tracking signal until it finally vanished from the radar. When the danger seemed to pass, Daniel leaned back in his seat, exhausted. Layara was standing near the viewport, gazing out at the endless stars. The light reflected in her silver skin made her seem like part of the cosmos itself. "You miss your home, don't you?" he asked quietly. She didn't look at him. "Yes, but home is not just a place. It is the people who make it." Her eyes shifted toward him. "And for now, you are my only people," he swallowed, unsure how to respond to that. There was something in her tone, not desperation, but certainty, as if she had already decided her place in his life. "Daniel," she said after a pause, "if we are to survive, you must understand this. They will not stop. The ones who captured me are part of something greater. They trade in lives, in knowledge, in power. If they cannot reclaim me, they will destroy me, and you, as my chosen, will be their target." Daniel leaned forward. "Then we need to know who they are, where they operate, and how to stop them." Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps we will, but first you must rest. We have a long journey ahead, and battles are not won by those who are weary." He almost argued, but the truth was, exhaustion had already begun to drag at his eyelids. Layara moved to the co-pilot's seat and quietly adjusted the navigation system. The ship hummed softly as it followed a new course. As Daniel closed his eyes, he realized something unsettling. Part of him felt safer with her here, even though she was the one being hunted. It was her presence that made him believe they might actually survive. Somewhere out in the cold darkness of space, danger was waiting. But so was something else, something he couldn't quite name yet. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel found himself wondering if maybe fate really did have a hand in this. Alien worlds and dangerous pursuit. The Star Wanderer slipped through the emptiness of space like a shadow on water. The hum of its engines was steady, but Daniel could feel the tension inside the small cabin, even without looking at the radar. He knew the peace wouldn't last. Layara sat in the co-pilot's seat, her glowing blue eyes fixed on the star map. She traced a path with her finger, a winding route through uncharted space. "If we keep to this course, we can reach the planet Nereus 4, she said. "It is a trading world, but far from the central lanes. They will not expect us there." Daniel frowned. "And if they do expect us?" Her lips curved slightly. "Then they will regret finding us." The confidence in her voice was unsettling and oddly comforting. Daniel wasn't used to trusting anyone this quickly, but Layara had already proven herself more than capable. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying straight into more trouble. The ship's console beeped suddenly. A warning light flashed red. Daniel checked the radar. His stomach tightened. "We've got company." Two small but fast ships had appeared on the scanner, closing in quickly. Layara leaned forward, scanning the display. "Hunters," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Light craft, built for speed. Their weapons are weak, but they will try to disable our engines." Daniel's hands tightened on the controls. "What's the plan?" Her eyes met his. "You fly," she said, unbuckling her harness. "I fight." He almost laughed until he saw her head toward the weapons station. Her movements were smooth, practiced. She activated the defense grid, and the Star Wanderer's hull hummed with power. The first volley came quick. Bright streaks of plasma lit up the black void. Daniel rolled the ship hard to the left, narrowly avoiding the blast. "They're fast," he muttered, Not fast enough, Liara replied. Her fingers danced across the weapons console. The ship's forward cannons roared, sending a volley of red-hot energy toward the hunters. One of them pulled away sharply. The other took a direct hit to its wing and spun out of formation. Daniel grinned despite himself. Nice shot, but Liara wasn't smiling. They won't fight alone, she said. More will come. She was right. Within moments, the radar lit up with two more blips, heavier ships this time, slower but armed with long-range disruptors. Daniel swore under his breath. We can't outrun them in open space. Liara's gaze flicked to the side of the star map. We can if we dive into the Orith Nebula. Daniel looked at her like she was insane. That thing's full of ion storms and gravitational pockets. We could get torn apart. She smiled faintly. Only if you do not know the safe paths. He hesitated for a moment, then pulled the ship toward the glowing mass of clouds ahead. The nebula loomed like a living creature, swirling with deep blues, fiery oranges, and flashes of silent lightning. The hunters followed. The Star Wanderer plunged into the storm, and the world outside became a kaleidoscope of color and light. Electric arcs danced across the shields. Shaking the ship, Daniel gritted his teeth. Fighting the controls, Liara moved with steady precision, feeding him directions. Left, now down. Keep close to the ridge, she said. If you drift too high, the magnetic field will crush us. He followed her instructions, weaving the ship through narrow gaps in the glowing clouds. The hunters were less skilled. One of them strayed too far from the safe zone, and a sudden flash of lightning swallowed it whole. Daniel risked a glance at her. You've done this before. Her voice was calm, almost nostalgic. Many times my people traveled across dangerous skies long before we had ships of our own. By the time they emerged from the nebulas far side, only one hunter remained. It turned sharply, unwilling to follow them further. The radar cleared, and Daniel finally let out the breath he'd been holding. Safe, he said with relief. For now, Liara replied. They set a course for Nereus 4. The tension in the cabin eased slightly. Daniel leaned back in his seat. I have to admit, you're not just good in a fight. You're terrifying, Liara tilted her head, a hint of amusement in her eyes. I take that as a compliment. Hours later, the green-blue sphere of Nereus 4 filled the viewport. It was a beautiful world, vast oceans, scattered islands, and shimmering ports floating on the water. Daniel guided the ship toward one of the larger trade platforms. When they docked, the warm, humid air of the ocean planet rushed into the cabin. The smell of salt water and strange flowers filled Daniel's senses. They stepped out onto the platform, blending into the crowd of merchants, travelers, and alien tourists. Daniel glanced around, half expecting to see more bounty hunters. But so far, the crowd seemed calm. Liara walked beside him, her posture tall and alert. Even in a sea of strangers, she stood out, not just because of her appearance, but because she moved like someone who belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. They entered a market built on floating platforms, the sounds of water splashing against the docks mixed with the chatter of traders. Liara stopped at a small stall selling carved shells and strange herbs. The old alien woman behind the counter looked at Liara with recognition, whispering something in a language Daniel didn't understand. Liara responded softly, and the woman handed her a small pouch. What was that about? Daniel asked once they were moving again. A message, Liara said simply. Old friends still watch these waters. Daniel didn't press for more, but he noticed her hand resting closer to the dagger at her side. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, they found a quiet place near the water's edge. The sky was painted in shades of gold and purple. Liara sat beside him, gazing out at the ocean. You could leave me here, she said quietly. It would be safer for you, Daniel looked at her, surprised. You think I'd just walk away after all this? Her eyes softened. It would be the logical choice. He shook his head. Logic's overrated. A small smile touched her lips, but before she could reply, the distant hum of engines echoed across the water. Daniel's stomach sank. Lyra's gaze sharpened. "They found us," she said, rising to her feet. The peaceful evening was over, and the hunt had begun again. The bond deepens. The last light of the Nereus 4 sunset faded into deep blue as Daniel and Lyra slipped through the narrow streets of the floating city. The hum of alien engines still echoed somewhere behind them, but for the moment, the hunters were not in sight. Daniel led her into a small, dimly lit docking bay at the far edge of the trade platform. A rusted metal door hissed open to reveal a forgotten maintenance station. The walls were covered with old tool racks and faded shipping labels. The scent of salt water drifted in through cracks in the metal siding. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. Lyra scanned the space with sharp eyes before stepping inside. She walked with the measured caution of someone who never stopped expecting danger. Daniel closed the door behind them and activated the manual lock. "You can relax now," he said, dropping his pack to the floor. She gave him a small glance. "Relaxation is for those who can afford to be careless." Daniel smirked faintly. "And I'm guessing you never can." Lyra's lips curved into a ghost of a smile. But she didn't answer. Instead, she removed a small bundle from her pouch and unwrapped it. Inside was a flat, folded sheet of deep green fabric. She spread it across the metal floor, creating a kind of mat. "Sit," she said simply. Daniel hesitated. "What is this?" "A hearth space," she explained. "My people use it when far from home. It marks a place of safety, as much as any place can be safe." He lowered himself onto the mat, the fabric warm beneath him. Lyra sat across from him, her posture straight but her expression softer than usual. For a long moment, they sat in silence, listening to the faint lapping of the ocean against the platform supports. Daniel found himself studying her, the way the light from a small wall lamp reflected in her silver skin, the subtle glow of her blue eyes in the dimness. "You said your people only choose a mate once," Daniel said finally. "What happens if you choose wrong?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Then we live with that choice. We believe that to undo it would be to deny the truth of the heart, even if it brings pain." "That's heavy," Daniel muttered. "Sounds like a lot of pressure." "It is," she said simply. "But love, real love, is not meant to be easy. It is meant to be worth the struggle." Daniel looked away, unsure how to respond. He wasn't sure he even believed in that kind of connection, but the way she spoke about it made it sound almost unbreakable. Lyra reached into her pouch again and pulled out a small, oval device. She pressed a hidden switch, and a soft golden light shimmered in the air between them. At first, Daniel thought it was a hologram. Then he realized it was a moving image. A landscape unfolded in the projection. Vast green plains under twin suns, rivers that glowed faintly at night, and towering stone structures shaped like spirals. Strange winged creatures drifted on the wind. "This is my home," Lyra said quietly. "The world of Kether." Daniel leaned forward. "It's beautiful." Her expression was unreadable. "It was before the traders came. They brought weapons and sickness. They took our strongest and our brightest and sold them." Her voice didn't crack, but there was a weight in her tone. Daniel felt it in his chest. "That's how they got you," he said softly. "Yes," she replied, "but I am not the only one. There are many more, still in chains." Daniel clenched his jaw. "Then maybe we can free them." Her eyes locked on his. "That is not a small promise, Daniel Cross." "I'm not a small kind of guy," he said, trying for a grin. But the moment felt too serious for it to land. They fell into quiet again. The ship's distant engines and the ocean outside were the only sounds. Lyra shifted slightly, reaching for something at her side. She took his left wrist gently and placed something in his hand. A small ring carved from some kind of smooth, pale stone. "What's this?" Daniel asked, turning it over in his fingers. "It is a bond mark," she said. "Not binding for you, but a symbol. In my people's eyes, it means you have been chosen." Daniel stared at the ring. "And if I wear it?" "Then you tell the galaxy that you are not alone," she said simply. "And that harming you is the same as harming me." Daniel didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure what it meant to accept something like this, not just culturally, but personally. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw no trick, no manipulation, only the same calm certainty she had carried since the moment they met. He slid the ring onto his finger. "Guess I'm in it now," he said quietly. Lyra's expression softened into the faintest smile. "You always were," before Daniel could respond. A deep, distant boom echoed through the docking bay. The metal walls rattled faintly. Lyra's head turned sharply toward the door. "They found us," she said, her voice low and steady. Daniel was on his feet instantly. "How many?" "Enough to mean trouble," she replied, already pulling her dagger from its sheath. He grabbed his blaster from his pack, checking the charge. The sound of heavy boots on metal grew louder outside. Lyra looked at him once more. "Daniel," she said, "if they get past me, you run. Do not hesitate." He shook his head. "Not happening." Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in something like approval. "Then we fight together," she said. The door control sparked, as someone tried to override it from the outside. The hum of the lock failing filled the air. Daniel's pulse quickened. He glanced at Lyra. She stood tall, weapon in hand, her blue eyes glowing brighter in the dim light. Whatever came next, Daniel knew this. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. They were protecting each other. The door burst open, and the fight began. The final stand. The metal door blew inward with a deafening crack. The blast sent smoke and sparks rolling across the small docking bay. Through the haze, shadows moved tall, armored figures with glowing visors and heavy weapons. The bounty hunters had arrived. Daniel ducked behind a stack of old shipping crates as the first volley of plasma fire tore through the air. The shots punched glowing holes into the metal walls, filling the space with the smell of burning steel. Lyra was already moving. Her body was a blur of silver and gold in the dim light. She darted forward, her dagger catching the glow of the enemy's rifles. With a swift, precise motion, she knocked the weapon from the nearest hunter's hands and drove the blade into a weak spot between the armor plates. The hunter went down hard. "Daniel, left side," she called. He leaned out from cover and fired his blaster. The shot slammed into another hunter's shoulder, spinning him into the wall. But more poured through the open doorway. They moved in formation, their boots pounding against the deck. Daniel's pulse raced. "We can't hold them here." "We hold as long as we must," Lyra replied, her voice calm even in the chaos. A plasma bolt grazed Daniel's arm, burning a line through his jacket. He gritted his teeth. Diving behind another stack of crates, Lyra vaulted over a barrel, flipping behind one of the attackers. Her movements were fluid and deliberate. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Daniel had fought before, but never like this. Never alongside someone who seemed to know exactly where the enemy would be before. They moved. Lyra fought like a dancer and a predator all at once. Still, there were too many. The room was small, and the hunters kept advancing, driving them toward the far wall. Daniel's eyes darted around, searching for any advantage. His gaze landed on a tall maintenance crane hanging above the docked skiffs. The control panel was only a few meters away. "Lyra," he shouted. "Cover me." Without hesitation, she spun toward him, parrying 2 incoming blows from electrified batons. Her dagger flashed in the dim light. "Go," she ordered. Daniel sprinted to the crane controls, firing over his shoulder to keep the hunters at bay. He slammed his palm onto the emergency release. The crane groaned, then swung its massive arm down into the middle of the docking bay. The metal beam smashed into 2 hunters, knocking them to the floor. Lyra took the opening, leaping onto the crane arm and using the momentum to launch herself at the squad leader, a towering brute with a serrated blade at his hip. They clashed in a flurry of steel and sparks. Lyra's dagger met his blade with a ringing crack. Daniel kept firing, his shots forcing the other hunters to scatter. But the squad leader was relentless. His strikes were powerful, each one forcing Lyra back a step. Daniel's gut twisted. He knew if the leader broke through, the fight would be over. He scanned the floor, spotted a loose cable hanging from the ceiling, and fired at its base. The cable dropped, sparking violently as it landed on the metal deck between Liara and her opponent. The sudden burst of electricity made the leader flinch, just long enough for Liara to step in close and drive her blade deep into the gap in his armor. The brute staggered, then fell, his blade clattering to the ground. The remaining hunters hesitated. Daniel seized the moment. "You want her? You'll have to go through me," he shouted, his voice raw. Liara stepped beside him, her eyes glowing like twin flames. "And me," she said. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one of the hunters barked a sharp order, and the squad began to retreat, dragging their wounded with them. They backed toward the door, their visors fixed on Daniel and Liara until the last possible moment. Then the door slammed shut, sealing them in the sudden silence. Daniel lowered his blaster slowly, his chest heaving. Sweat ran down his face, mixing with the acrid smoke. We won?" he asked, almost disbelieving. Lyra's gaze stayed fixed on the door. "For now," she said. "They will return, and next time they will bring more." Daniel wiped his arm across his forehead. "Then we'd better not be here." "When they do," she turned to face him, her expression softening. "You fought well," he laughed tiredly. "I fought desperately. Desperation can be a weapon," she replied, "and tonight it saved us both." For a moment, they stood in the quiet hum of the docking bay. The tension between them had changed. It was no longer the wary alliance of strangers thrown together, but something deeper. Forged in the heat of survival, Liara stepped closer, her voice low. "Do you see now why I said I would not leave you?" Daniel met her gaze. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I see it now." She reached out, brushing her fingers lightly over the ring she had given him. "You carry my mark, Daniel Cross. That means you are not alone, not in battle. Not in life," he swallowed, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't just a promise of protection, it was a vow, one that bound them in ways he hadn't fully understood until this moment. Before he could respond, the station's alarm system blared. Red lights flashed along the walls, and a robotic voice announced, "Docking bay breach in progress." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "They are not done," she said. Daniel looked toward the ship, already calculating the fastest route back to the Star Wanderer. "Then we run," he said. "But next time we take the fight to them." Lyra's lips curved into a fierce smile. "Now you sound like a Cathari." They moved together toward the ship, weapons ready. The battle was over, but the war, their war, had just begun. Rescued by love, the Star Wanderer roared to life, its engines glowing like molten fire in the dim docking bay. Daniel sprinted up the loading ramp with Liara close behind. The red alarm lights bathed them in flashes of crimson, and the automated warning kept repeating, "Docking bay breach in progress. They're coming from the Westport tunnel." Daniel shouted, glancing at the radar feed. Blips moved like sharks through the corridors toward them. Liara didn't waste words. She slammed her hand onto the ramp controls, and the metal hatch sealed shut with a hiss. The moment it did, she bolted for the co-pilot's chair. Daniel slid into the pilot's seat, fingers flying over the controls. "Hang on," he called. The ship's thrusters screamed as they lifted from the platform, the hull vibrating under the sudden strain. The bay doors ahead began to open, far too slowly. In the distance, shadows moved, and the first flash of plasma fire streaked toward them. Lyra's hands danced over the defense grid. "Shields up," she called. A shimmer of blue energy wrapped around the Star Wanderer. Just as the first blast hit, the impact rattled through the ship, but the shields held. The gap in the bay doors widened, revealing the open sky of Nereus 4. Daniel pushed the engines to maximum. The ship shot forward like an arrow, clearing the bay just as more hunters poured into the docking platform behind them. "Incoming pursuit," Liara said, her voice steady but sharp. 3 ships had launched from the far side of the city. Closing in fast, Daniel's mind raced. We can't outrun them in the open. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Then we won't. She keyed in a rapid sequence on the weapon system. The ship's rear cannons roared, spitting a barrage of fire that forced their pursuers to swerve. Daniel took the chance to dive low. Skimming the ocean's surface, waves sprayed high against the hull, leaving vapor trails behind them. The hunters followed, weaving over the water like predators chasing prey. One of them moved in close, too close. Liara fired again. The blast hitting dead center. The enemy ship exploded in a bloom of orange light, scattering debris into the sea. To left, Daniel said, his grip tightening on the controls. Lyra's gaze flicked to the horizon. Head for the storm wall. Daniel looked ahead. A towering curtain of dark clouds stretched across the ocean. Lightning forked through it in violent bursts. That's suicide, he said. It's survival. She replied, her voice leaving no room for doubt. With no better option, Daniel steered toward the storm. The hunters followed, either too confident or too desperate to turn back. The Star Wanderer plunged into the wall of rain and wind. Lightning danced across the shields, and the hull groaned under the pressure. The storm swallowed all sound except the roar of the engines and the pounding of rain on metal radar readings. Flickered and died. The interference was too strong. In the chaos, Daniel banked hard to the left, diving into a narrow canyon carved into the ocean by ancient volcanic ridges. The hunters weren't as lucky. One ship miscalculated the turn and slammed into the canyon wall, disappearing in a flash of fire. The last ship fired wildly, but the bolts went wide in the turbulent winds. Liara took the shot, her cannons slicing through the storm to hit their target. The explosion lit the rain for a brief, brilliant moment, before fading into darkness. Silence settled in the cockpit, except for the hum of the engines and the hiss of rain sliding down the shields. Daniel exhaled slowly. We made it. Lyra's eyes stayed on the fading storm behind them. For now, she said, but her voice was softer, almost relieved. Daniel guided the ship out of the clouds and into clear skies. Stars sparkled overhead, sharp and cold against the black. He slowed the engines and leaned back in his chair, the tension in his muscles finally starting to loosen. They didn't speak for a while, letting the quiet settle over them like a blanket. Liara unbuckled her harness and stepped toward the viewport. She stood there for a long moment, her hands resting lightly on the edge, gazing out at the endless spread of stars. You could have left me, she said at last, her voice low. Many would have, to save themselves. Daniel shook his head. I couldn't. She turned to face him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. Why? He met her gaze without looking away. Because you're not just some stranger I pulled out of trouble anymore. You're part of my crew, part of my life. He hesitated, then added, and because somewhere along the way, I started caring what happens to you. Her expression didn't change for a moment. Then the corners of her lips curved into the faintest smile. And you still think fate had no hand in this? Daniel let out a quiet laugh. Maybe I'm starting to believe it. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint silver lines in her skin, markings he hadn't noticed before. On my world, she said softly, when someone saves your life and your heart, you don't let them walk alone. He glanced at the pale stone ring still on his finger. Guess I'm not walking alone anymore. No, she agreed, you are not. For the first time since they'd met, her hand rested lightly on his, not as a warrior guarding her ally, but as something more outside. The Star Wanderer drifted quietly through the dark, the danger behind them, for now. But Daniel knew this wasn't the end. Somewhere out there, the ones who had taken her would be regrouping, planning their next move. He looked at Liara and felt a strange certainty settle in his chest. Whatever came next, they would face it together. She turned back toward the stars, her voice quiet but sure. 2 worlds, 1 journey, Daniel smiled. Then let's see where it takes us. The Star Wanderer's engines flared and the ship angled toward the unknown. disappearing into the deep black, carrying with it a human who had never meant to be a hero, and an alien woman who had chosen him long before he understood why. Somewhere in the quiet between the stars, they had both been rescued, not just from danger, but from the loneliness they had carried for far too long, and that Daniel realized was a different kind of victory, one worth holding on to.